Hello, my beloved Primary 4 students. This is Lesson 2 of Speed Concept. In Lesson 1 Wonder, we thought of different questions about speed, like how can you measure the speed of something moving fast? What is the relation between speed and the distance the object travels and time it takes to travel there? إيه العلاقة ما بين distance والtime والspeed? What is the fastest land animal? And also, how can we compare the speed of objects and decide which object is faster than the other? Today, we will start learn lessons, and our main goal is to know what's meant by speed and compare different speeds of moving objects. Get your book, paper, and pen to start our lesson. We knew in the last lesson that there is a high-speed train, and its speed is higher than any other normal trains. We also learned that the cheetah is the fastest land animal. Its high speed makes it able to run for 100 meters in about 6 seconds. We also knew we could find out the speed of any object when we calculate the distance it traveled and the time it takes to run this distance, like the runner, horse, car, and rocket. In a 4 minutes time, we found that rocket travels a very large distance more than car, and the car distance was longer than the horse, and the horse distance was longer than that of the human. You will also observe that you use the word speed daily. Sometimes you ask one of your friends who was the fastest to finish the game, or challenge them who can run faster than me. Which car is the fastest when you play with the racing cars? So, what do we mean by the term speed in science? And how can we identify examples around us of objects moving at different speeds? And how can we make comparison between these moving objects? Activity number 4 will help us answer this question, and we will use the analysis skills to analyze like a scientist. In Analyze Like a Scientist, we will learn the basics of speed. Can you observe this picture well? Did you see this sign before? Do you know where we exactly see it? Yes, this is the sign that we see on highways, and we also see it while we are traveling from one place to another. What is the information we get from this sign? Let's start analyzing it together. What is it written on this sign? There is a number, and below it there is kilometer code and the slash, then H. Can you see it? عندنا number وبعدين kilometer slash hour. What is this? When you studied that in math, I think you studied it in math. Excellent. Kilometer indicates the distance, kilometer, and the second code means hour, representing the time. These codes represent distance and time. So what does this mean? That's right, the speed. So this number expresses speed. Do you remember in our last lesson, I asked you to think of something? What does 60 km per hour means? When I see a sign like this on the road, I know from it that the speed limit the car shouldn't exceed while moving. So this sign in front of us tells us the maximum speed allowed for the car on the road. تقدروا تقولوا لي ايه هي الماكسيمم سبيد اللي مفروض العربية ما تعديهاش from the sign? Yes, it's 80 km per hour. We shouldn't exceed this number. Is it possible for the cars to move at different speed than this sign? Yes, of course. They can move at slower speed, 70, 60, or 50 km per hour, but it's not allowed to move faster than this. For the safety of the passenger and the safety of the people on the road. But how the car speed limit is set on the road? Why is it 80 and not 90, for example? Let's open our book on page 191 and read the first part of the text. Get your pen, then underline the most important information that will help you answer the questions. Don't forget that you wrote down the answer to the question, can you explain? And you need to collect more information to add them to your answer. The most important question you need to answer when you start reading is it: what is speed? After reading the first part, you think of a simple drawing that expresses the speed and use simple words to express. I always do that to understand things easily. One view might think of drawing someone riding a bike, and right under it, speed is measurement of how fast something moving. Speed is measuring how fast something is moving. خدتوا بالكم؟ Someone else can draw a car that goes on the road and write that speed means that car travel with a specific speed in a given period of time. We can think of many drawings and definitions, but what is the scientific definition of speed in science? Of course, we all highlighted the sentence, speed is a measurement of how fast something is moving. Speed measures the distance that the object travels over time. Speed measures distance per time. Let's begin analyzing what this means in a simple way. Speed is a measurement of how fast something is moving. Speed measures the distance that an object travels over time. I'll draw, for example, a car on the board. If I want to talk about the speed of this object, احنا دلوقتي هنتكلم على السبيد. We will refer to the speed of the object's movement, meaning the speed of this car during motion. And to reach it, I must know the distance it traveled and the time it takes to travel there. عشان أقدر أحسب السبيد, I must know two things. مين هما؟ Distance it traveled, المسافة اللي هتمشيها, والtime. The time it takes to travel this distance. As we learned in mathematics, we have different units of measurements. In the distance, we use the unit of meter or kilometer if it's large. So, for distance, we can use the unit kilometer or meter. تمام? Those are the units of the distance. Like when we are measuring the distance between two cities, طبعا هنستخدم الكيلومتر. And what about the time? The units are like seconds or hours. When we talk about time, بنتكلم على seconds or hours. طيب. This will take us to the second sentence that I highlighted. And I think it's very important. It gives a definition for speed and how can we calculate the speed of moving object. The second sentence says, to calculate an object's speed, divide the distance it travels by time it takes to travel there. تعالوا نترجم ده على البورد. To calculate the speed, هنعمل إيه؟ We divide the distance by time. So, for example, if the car that I drew traveled 8 meters, can you calculate the speed? Of course not, because we need to know the time it takes to travel this distance. ما احنا اتفقنا ان انا هحتاج حاجتين عشان احسب السبيد: distance and time. If I know the distance only, we cannot calculate the speed. And if we knew the time only, we cannot calculate the speed too. تمام؟ طيب, if I told you that it takes 8 seconds to do this, we can then divide the distance, which is 8, into the time, which is 4. So the distance was 8 divided by 4. So my result is 2. The speed is 2. طب هل أقدر أسيبها كده من غير unit؟ What is the unit؟ إحنا قلنا إن distance it was meter and the time was seconds. So my unit is meter per second. طيب انتوا ممكن تشوفوا الشكل ده وممكن تشوفوه بطريقة مختلفة. تعالوا اوريكم الطريقة المختلفة. ممكن نشوف الرول ده as a fraction. ازاي هنشوفه fraction؟ We can see it as a fraction. Speed equal distance over time or divided time. لازم تتعودوا على الشكل ده كمان. احنا كنا قايلين ان ال distance 8 and the time was 4, so the speed is 2 meter per second. Okay? Of course, we can write it like meter per second or kilometer per hour. Meter per second or kilometer per hour, depending on what speed we calculate. So we can say that the number on the sign, which is 80, is the result of dividing the distance the car will travel in kilometer by an hour. فاكرين الساين اللي احنا شفناها في أول الحلقة؟ لما لقينا 80 كيلومتر per hour ده معناها ان هي الكار دي مشيت 80 كيلومتر، دي الديستنس بتاعتها and the time was 1 hour. Let's continue reading and analyzing the text on page 192. While analyzing the text, try to identify and highlight the sentences that tell us how to compare an object speed with another object speed. I mean, how can we say that there is an object faster than other? Did you find the answer for this question? I'll tell you my analysis of the second part of the text. I highlighted the sentence, to compare the speed of the object to another object, measure the distance both objects travel in a given period of time. And the sentence of, the object that travels the greater distance in the same amount of time is moving at a greater speed. أكيد العربية اللي هتمشي مسافة أكبر في نفس الوقت كده هتبقى أسرع. Another way to compare speed is to see which object move a given distance in a small amount of time. يعني لو two objects هيمشوا نفس المسافة مين هياخد وقت أقل. Let me show you this on the board. Now I'll draw another car, okay, next to my first car. تمام؟ This is car number 1 and this is number 2. Now we are going to compare their speeds. عشان أقدر أعمل comparison للسبيد بتاعتهم لازم أحسب إيه؟ Distance and time. We should first identify the distance that each object travel at the same time. If I said that the first car traveled 8 kilometers per hour, and the second car traveled 9 kilometers per hour. 9 kilometers per hour. Which one would be faster? خلي بالكم أول عربية مشيت 8 كيلومتر في الساعة، تاني عربية مشيت 9 كيلومتر في الساعة. Which one is faster? Of course the one who traveled greater distance at the same time اللي هي 9 kilometers per hour. Another way to compare the speed is to see which object move a given distance in a smaller period of time. Like if two cars are racing 1000 meters, the car that finished in less time will be, yes, it will be faster. زي بالظبط لما بنعمل سباق الجري اللي بيوصل الأول هو أسرع واحد ده أخد وقت قليل. Now it's your time to go back to your book on page 192 and record all that you learned and collect it from your analysis of the text. Then explain what speed is and draw a simple picture like this one to use in explaining and clarifying the meaning of speed. My students in the class recorded their answers and drawing. They were different, but they all had the same common ideas. طبيعي يعني يبقى في ما بيننا اختلافات، بس في حاجات أساسية ما ينفعش تبقى مختلفة. For example, speed expresses the distance an object travel at a certain amount of time. أكيد كلنا قلنا إن السرعة معناها المسافة اللي هنمشيها في وقت معين. We can compare the object speeds by identifying which object travel a greater distance at the same amount of time or travel the same distance in a less time. وقلنا برضو ازاي نقدر نقارن ما بين سرعة الأشياء اللي حوالينا. لو هنثبت مثلا المسافة هنشوف مين هياخد وقت أقل عشان يقطع المسافة دي، ولو هنثبت الوقت هنشوف مين هيقطع مسافة أطول في الوقت ده. Let's think about people who are responsible for airplane, train and different transportation trips. They always make very accurate measurements of speed because even 1 second is important in identifying the trip's schedule. Can you remember the last time you traveled to a place? Which transportation did you take? Train, car, or airplane? I, for example, used these 3 transportations, and the trip sometimes took 3 hours and sometimes 5 hours. I also traveled to Aswan twice. First time by car and the second time by airplane. In both times of the airplane was faster. This will take us to activity number 5, observe like a scientist. In observe like a scientist, we will measure an object, measuring an object's motion. In this activity, we will observe the information we will need to calculate the speed accurately. Let's watch the video to find out how to calculate the speed of a moving object. افتكروا ان احنا مفروض نتعلم من الفيديو ده ازاي نقدر نحسب حركة الأوبجكتس. Let's watch it.
How did you get to school today? Do you know how far your school is from your home? We call the journey between the two the distance you traveled. We often measure the distance that moving things travel. Look at this boy. He's training for a competition. He's running 800 meters on a track, and the cars are crawling along a 10-kilometer stretch of road. If your school is a long distance from home, you might have to take a bus or travel in a car. It would take a very long time to walk. That's an easy pass. The distance the ball travels is short because they're standing close together. How far do you think this golf ball will travel? Something moving very fast, like a train, can cover a large distance in a short time. Speed tells us how fast something or someone is traveling. This looks exciting. Anything going downhill picks up speed because of gravity. You can find the average speed of a moving object if you know the distance traveled and the time it took. Here, this car is traveling at 80 kilometers per hour. In other words, the rate it's moving at will mean it will travel 80 kilometers in 1 hour. Faster moving things have higher speeds, and slower moving things have lower speeds. To work out the average speed you travel getting to school or cycling to your friend's house, you need to divide the distance you travel by the time it takes you to get there. Check out this cheetah. Tell me what you need to know to work out the speed it's running.
Now, let's think. How can we calculate the cheetah's speed? Yes, now I'm sure all of you know how to do it. First, we should have the distance that cheetah traveled, then the time it took to travel this distance. So what we should do in this case? Very good. We will divide the distance by the time to find out the speed. عشان نقدر نحسب سرعة الشيتا، أول حاجة هنجيب ال distance المسافة، تاني حاجة هنجيب ال time, then we will divide distance by time. After finding out the speed, what unit of measurement do we use for speed? اتفقنا إن ما ينفعش بعد ما أحسب السرعة أسيب الرقم كده من غير ما أكتب unit. We can use meter per second or kilometer per hour, meter per second or kilometer per hour. Now, we will go back to the book on page 193 and read the text. You should record your observation about how can we calculate the speed of a moving object. I want you to underline the sentences that explain what you need to have to calculate the speed. Also, circle one example of the unit of measurement used to describe the speed. عايزة منك تحط خط تحت الحاجات اللي هنحتاجها عشان نحسب السبيد، وتعمل لي circle على اليونت that we can use to measure the speed. Of course, we underline the word distance and time because we need them to calculate the speed. We also circled either kilometer per hour or meter per second because they are the measurement units to describe speed. Now you can easily calculate the speed of objects' motion and know the units to use in your measurements. This is the end of our lesson. We used our science skills, analysis, and observation. Let's recap. We analyzed the picture and the text to identify the speed definition scientifically, which is one of the key vocabularies in this concept. Let's add it to the key vocabulary wall. كلمة السرعة كلمة مهمة جداً، وعرفنا النهاردة إزاي نقدر نحسب السرعة. We also knew that speed calculation depend on distance and time. And we said that we use measurement units, like what? Kilometer per hour or meter per second. Then, we made a comparison between the speed of objects in motion. We observed from the video that we can accurately calculate an object's motion speed. This is important for our next lesson because we will measure the speed of an object's motion, which that's really fast. Prepare your tools and review what we learned about motion and speed. Thank you, my lovely scientists, and see you in our next lesson.